Hello everybody, today we're coming to you from 34 Tropical, which is an amazing cafe, and we're armed with our coffees. I've got this coconut coffee here, which is absolutely amazing, iced coffee on a nice hot day, and you're drinking a standard sort of Americano.
Standard Americano for me.
There we go.
Standard black coffee.
So I'm here today with Ben Wood, fellow career coach. Ben's specialization is really in those government jobs, and today we're going to be exploring government jobs and having a look at kind of all the different aspects of when it comes to applying for government jobs, some of the tips and strategies for how you can really maximize your applications, about some of the biggest and most common mistakes that people make when it comes to government jobs. So Ben, first question to you today. When it comes to government jobs, especially interviews, what do you think are the most common mistakes that sort of trip people up in your experience?
Focusing on that likability.
Oh, it's a big one, yeah.
And just that, and within the government selection process, the intention is for it to be merit-based and somewhat scientific in the way, or if that's the right term, but people are assessed to a set of standards. But we're all humans and we have biases, and you want the hiring manager to like you. So coming straight out into the interview with a smile, with like genuine enthusiasm, expressing your interest in the role with actually some enthusiasm and authenticity is really important. And people talk about the halo effect, right? So what that means is if someone likes you and gets a strong first impression, that everything you say after that is given sort of extra weight, or it's extra, there's a added impact in what you say. And interviews are all about building trust and credibility through that conversation, right? So don't overlook that. Just practicing that first impression, practicing in the mirror, practicing with a friend, how you do that opening. Thanks for your time today. Using the people's names that you're interviewing with.
Important.
Use their names, thank them for their time, express that gratitude and just excitement. And I realize it's easier said than done, right? Because you're often nervous as anything, right? So pretending that you're not nervous and you're actually just happy to be there is actually a bit of an art. But if you put yourself in the shoes of the person running the interview, they've probably got back-to-back interviews. I mean, that's how these things operate, right? The panel will be set up. They'll have 10, 15 candidates to interview, and they're all set up back-to-back, So when you get onto an interview and someone's looking nervous as anything, and they start with a timid voice and, a sort of shaky intro, it gives you that sinking feeling of someone running the interview. Man, this is going to be a long half an hour.
Painful.
And you kind of, it's also hard too, because you want the person to succeed, and most people feel compassion in that situation. You don't want the person to feel uncomfortable. So anyway, likability, I think, is something not to overlook. It's just, even if the first question that you get asked is actually, hey, tell me about a time you solved a complex problem in project delivery, you can still, the first time you talk, introduce yourself and thank them for their time and say how happy you are to be there and show that enthusiasm, even if the opening of the interview is actually like directly into a question.
I think likability is incredibly important, because you could have two candidates who have both got the same skills, both got the same experience, but it's human nature that we want to work with people that we like. So that's something that you definitely kind of want to keep in mind, going, what are my likability traits that I need to be portraying? And then one of that thing is that smiling, that contact, that eye contact with people, being human at the end of the day. So I think we need to focus on that, being genuine, being warm. And because they're thinking, can we work with this person?
Exactly.
Do we like them?
Yeah.
And that's going to be the differentiator.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's another sort of a thing that kind of trips people up, common mistakes when it comes to government interviews?
Sure. Well, and this, I guess, is actually another thing that's really common to private, and it's universal, really, for how we come across in an interview, is soft language. So when we talk about ourselves using, well, the easiest example to talk about is using we. So when we talk about a project we worked on, most people don't want to steal the credit from the team. You know, it was a team effort. So we use these we, you know, we achieved the launch on time, or, you know, we completed the testing, or whatever it was. And that doesn't work in an interview situation. And especially in the government context, where your job is to provide evidence that you meet the criteria. And when you say we did something, you're not actually describing what your role was and your impact. So you're missing out on an opportunity to actually describe what you did. So that's the easiest one, and people learn that pretty quickly when they're you know, swatting up on government interviews and the STAR technique. But moving past just saying we, there's a lot of soft language that people use, like I discussed. You know? So you want, rather than like I discussed, you could say I negotiated.
It's the language.
I facilitated a discussion. I engaged stakeholders. You know, so there's often just some phrase or word choice, and it's not about using fancy language that you're not comfortable with. It's more just looking at where you can strengthen your language to really show the impact of your work. And a lot of the time, the job description tells you exactly what to say. It's not a mystery. You want to have a lot of strong I action verb statements. Like I said, I investigated, I analyzed, I negotiated, I led, I supervised, I completed. So listening to yourself, telling your stories and practicing, and then looking for those opportunities is really worthwhile, because it just uplifts your communication style.
I think a lot of people are a bit reluctant to use the word I, only because usually they feel awkward about using this I. When they go, well, actually, we did it as the team. And so they're reluctant to say the word I. And I think it is that modesty. They just feel awkward about it, and they don't want the limelight being on them. But that is what the interview is there to do. I always say, like, I'm not hiring your whole team. I don't want you to use we. I want you to use I language. It's really important, because that's who I'm looking to hire, is the you. So don't be shy. Don't be reluctant to use the word I, because that's what it's all about. You are there to interview you. What are some of the ways that people can sort of practice this sort of things? Because I always say, when you go into an interview, part of your preparation is not to be saying those words for the first time in an interview. You want to have some sort of way that you can go, my mouth has said these words before, typically in this order. This is not foreign territory to me. What are some of the ways that people can do sort of practice some of those things before they go into the interview? Maybe aloud as well.
Well, look, absolutely, practicing out loud is the number one thing you need to do. All too often, people internalize a lot of their practice. You know, so they're writing notes and they're writing scripts, or they're digesting information, ChatGPT suggestions and things like that. And really what you need to do is put in repetitions of practicing your answer, just like getting good at any sport. Honestly, like interviewing is a skill that you can improve. Everyone can improve their interview skills. And the way to do it, just like improving your tennis serve, is to just get out there and practice, right? And it's practicing out loud and playing it back and actually analyzing it a little bit for, you know, where are the terms are there terms or phrases I could improve? Also, how long the answer is too. And I mean, that's what you would get to later after you're comfortable with your answer. But yeah, 100% practicing out loud. Also practicing recording and playing it back and doing some reflection on it. And all, you know, being realistic too about how much practice and when you can practice. So you really need to be fresh. You know, there's no point doing a long, like 10-hour day in the office and then cooking the kids dinner and then just before you go to bed going, okay, I'm going to do 2 hours of interview practice till 1 a.m. It doesn't work well like that. You've got to do repetition across a number of days, and especially, you know, ideally when you feel fresh and rested and, you know, you're able to really deeply focus on it.
And I think it's also, you don't want to over practice the same token where it just sounds like you're reading from a script, and the interviewer can often see that immediately, going, this guy's practice it so well, they're reading the lines like an actor would. So what are your suggestions for practicing it but not making it sound like you're reading or you've memorized it, because that just breaks the authenticity of the voice, doesn't it? What's your suggestions around that?
It's a really good question. And what ideally with your practice, you're not trying to memorize long descriptive answers. What you're trying to memorize are the details and the sequence of events, and particularly around those results, like really strong results. And it's great to have that recall of specific details.
Yeah.
I worked with a team of 7 people for 9 months, and we made a 25% improvement in the process or whatever it was, right? You need to have that recollection of details, but it's not about memorizing scripts, right?
Yeah.
It's not about trying to commit that to memory. It's about being familiar with the details.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, is we're not striving for a perfect, it's not a speech, it's not a keynote address at a conference, right? So having filler words is okay. Having some pauses is okay.
Yep.
Using simple language is okay.
Yeah.
What you need to do is practice make sure you've committed to memory the key facts of the story and what really show your input.
Yes. Yeah. One of those other things that we spoke about a little while ago was the concept of sounding the part, and you mentioned the concept of the idea of the ILS into that, because that's kind of like your blueprint of how you need to sound, isn't it?
Yeah, look, it certainly is. And when it comes to this review of listening to your answers and looking for where you can strengthen these statements, the integrated leadership system for federal government gives you effectively that scorecard.
Okay.
So in theory, if I was interviewing a person at a certain level, the scorecard for how they have to perform at that level is right there in black and white. It's very clear. So you can actually draw some inspiration, by reading, referencing that, but also the job description. I mean, that's the job description is where you should always start, right? So that actually gives you some clues and some of the words I used before, right? So analyzed, investigated, interpreted. Yeah. And there's a lot of language usually around how you engage with stakeholders. So, that's actually a recipe you can follow. I think a lot of people everyone's aware about the ILS, but unsure how to use it. And one way I would suggest of how to use it is, in that practice, and when you're listening to your answers, reference it and see if there's any phrases you can use from it.
Yeah. I think, and it's basically the hard work has been done for you in that ILS. It tells you exactly it's given you the recipe, basically, of what you need to sound, how you need to think, how you need to communicate. The hard work is already done for you. You just need to get familiar with that language that is used at that particular level. So another thing I just want to ask you quickly is really around the practicing. A lot of times when people practice, they'll either use a ChatGPT or they'll practice in the mirror. But one of the things that often they're missing is the key feedback, and that you can only get from working with someone like yourself, who's an actual coach. Tell us a little bit more about the type of feedback that you would typically give people maybe if you do mock interviews with them on that practicing of that star, that they wouldn't typically get if they just work with themselves.
Yeah, well, getting feedback is really, really critical to improve. And you can get good feedback from people who are experienced panel members who've been through that interview process and assess people at your level. So there's often an issue of access to those people and their time. One of the reasons that working with a coach is really good is we not only have the feedback to offer of where people need to improve, but the framework to make those improvements. So the examples and style that you can use, what I like to call actionable feedback, right? People often get feedback like your answers weren't strong enough, or you didn't demonstrate leadership. But how could you demonstrate leadership?
They don't tell you that, do they?
This is something you can explore with a coach and go back through some of your work and say, where are the opportunities to demonstrate leadership, and how would we word that? How would we talk about that? And those interactions and explorations you don't get it's very, very difficult to get that for people who are not in that zone of coaching people and understanding communication skills around interviewing. And this is where like ChatGPT and other tools of it are very useful for elements of job applications and even interview prep. It's great at generating questions, but it's not great at giving you feedback, really actionable feedback.
Exactly.
And the example answers that you often get out of AI tools are also not really on point. They're very generic.
They can be,
and it's, it's kind of hard to get very specific, actionable advice from them.
I'm going to throw a bit of a curveball question at you now. And it's not something we discussed earlier on, but can you give an example of where you're working with somebody who was struggling, going to interviews, getting that sort of generic sort of feedback saying you didn't demonstrate those leadership skills or those sort of things there, and how you kind of coached them and then had a great success or outcome from that? Have you got any specific example that you can talk about?
So I'm thinking of a particular client I worked with who for a couple of years had been interviewing at a APS 6 level in federal government, so looking for that promotion step.
Yes.
And when I met him, his STAR technique was just off. I could tell straight away. So it was actually a very quick kind of diagnosis when we met, and I said, hey, let's go through a practice question from your last interview you had.
Yeah.
And I could tell straight away that the STAR structure was off. So it was a case of, for this individual, really shifting that language to strong I, action, verb statements. And another very common thing was people often talk way too long about the setup of a story, giving this context and this background, and and this person was in tech, so there was a lot of kind of like all this backstory of why this project was happening and the other things happening in this release and dependencies and all that sort of thing. And often that needs to just be distilled down to a project I worked on.
Yes.
Because we need to spend our time in the A zone, the action zone.
Yes. The most important part of the STAR.
Yeah. So for this person, it was actually some structural adjustments.
Okay.
To, hey, let's spend 70% of the time in the action part, and let's actually, listen back to some sample answers and look at that. So he was spending 50% of the time in the context setting zone, and running out of time at the end to make an impact with what he did. So and then that adjustment was very quickly made, and we just did some practice sessions around that. So that was that adjustment was pretty easy. Then it was really the shift in powerful language. So really getting those strong I action statements and focusing on those results too. So how do we be really articulate about the results with numbers and facts and details and really bring it home? And for this particular individual, what really put the icing on the cake was actually talking about lessons learned and challenges. So not only did we deliver a great STAR story, we also did this reflection part, what I learned, the capabilities we built, or, what was challenging. So it was not just a story to tick a box. It was actually really interesting and exciting.
Because you want to make it engaging for the listener, because I remember doing a lot of STARs with people, and you're just kind of sitting there going, oh shit, did I fall asleep? It's so we've got to keep the audience engaged, because it is the art of storytelling, really, at the end of the day. How long should a STAR answer be typically, where you keep their attention or you lose their attention because you've waffled on for too long? Is there a sweet spot?
Yeah, there is. I think it sort of varies in the complexity of your answer. So, and this is a big difference really of private sector to public sector. In private sector, generally, I would say, I don't know what your opinion is, but you shouldn't really talk for longer than a couple of minutes, right? Like
that's what I was thinking as well.
You're really you need to make it interactive, and you can always say, hey, would you like me to go into more detail about part of that? Or, Jonathan, I covered that at a pretty high level. Would you like me to go back and talk more about how I did this? Or and you make it interactive. You don't really do that in public sector panel interviews. There can be interaction, of course, but you need to have quite a detailed, structured answer. So it's a little bit more like an examination.
Oh, okay.
In a way.
Yep.
So anyway, sorry, complicated answer to a simple question. How long should it be?
How long should it be? Yeah.
2 to 4 minutes, I would say. Yeah. Any longer than 4 minutes, I think, is a bit risky because you're going to run out of time in these quite short time box interviews.
Yeah.
So, but and that can depend too on if you're going for a senior leadership role, your answer needs to be richer and a bit more detailed.
Yeah.
So more like a maybe 3 to 4 minute answer. If it's a simpler entry level role, your answers could be 90 seconds. So there's no like hard and fast rule. But I think that 2 to 4 minute is the zone you should be in, really.
Yeah. Well, I find the two areas that people kind of gloss over when it comes to their star questions is they set the stage very well. They do the S. The T part, the task part, is a little bit muddled, and they often forget the R part, the result.
Yes.
They spend a lot of time setting the stage and telling them what they did or what we did. We've already discussed that, but they miss out on the result, and that's really where the crux is often. Like, what happened to the end of the story? Imagine you've got the person sitting on the edge of their seat going, and then what happened? And then you kind of miss that whole part out. So they want to see how you bring that whole story together and really how you demonstrate value to the organization as well. One last question quickly. Nerves. Nerves is a big thing that trips people up, especially in government interviews. You're sitting there, you're in front of a panel. What are some techniques that people can kind of use to sort of calm those nerves, take control of that situation?
Yeah, look, it's a massive problem for a lot of people. It really impacts performance. And if you're one of those people, you have to get on top of it. You have to find a way to get on top of it. And there's no one-size-fits-all approach, but there's certainly things that, a lot of my clients give positive feedback on. Box breathing. Very simple. Go to YouTube. Box breathing. There's loads of examples of it. It only takes 5 minutes.
It's a great example.
It only takes 10, 15 seconds to learn how to do it. It's just very simple. You just sit down and do it. But that reduces anxiety at a physical level in your body, works very effectively. Other things that work well, visualization. Look, also I think that 24-hour routine before the interviews is super important. Look, hands down, the number one thing that's going to reduce your nerves and anxiety is being prepared, right? So if you can go to bed the night before the interview with that belief that, hey, I've done everything I can. I've done all the practice I can. I've done some mock interviews. I've refined my language. I've got good stories. I know what I'm going to say. I've practiced some special questions or niche questions. I'm happy. That's going to give you the best confidence on the day.